cinnamon streusel coffee cake. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a stick of butter that I have softened. I'm going to mush it around a little. And then I'm going to add to it a cup of flour and a cup of brown sugar that is packed tight. You see how it comes out in one thing that's packed really tight. And we're going to mix it together. You can use a spoon. I just prefer my hands because it gets me the feel that I want. And we're going to, basically we're looking for the consistency of wet sand. This is the messy part of the job. Once you get it to where you can tell that all of the sugar and flour is incorporated with the butter. Sometimes you might just have to squeeze the butter a little more. And then we're going to add to that a teaspoon of vanilla. You can also add pecans, walnuts, almonds, anything else you like in a topping. I don't, because I don't really like nuts. And this client doesn't like nuts either. So we are just going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. That's what I just poured in. And no nuts. See how we have that sandy texture? Wet sand, like you're putting your toes in at the beach. That's what that is. So once our topping is made, we're going to set it aside and work on our cake. So for the cake batter, we have a cup of softened butter. To that I'm going to add 3/4 cup of packed brown sugar and a 1/2 cup of white sugar. And we're going to put that on high and cream them together until they're light and fluffy. And while that's mixing, I'm going to take 2 cups of all-purpose flour and add to it a teaspoon of baking powder and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now that we have light and fluffy sugar, we're going to add 2 eggs. And 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Mix that on high again. So as a kid, I always thought coffee cake had coffee in it, so I would never eat it. We would have it at brunches and family gatherings. I hated the taste of coffee, so I thought I would never want to eat coffee cake. And then I found out it's really just cake and cinnamon and sugar. And now I regret all of those times I went without coffee cake. Alright, now we're going to add that dry mixture that we put together earlier. That's 2 cups of flour, a teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Then we're going to add 1/3 cup of half and half. I make my own. We use heavy cream, half heavy cream and half regular milk, and that'll make half and half for you. Just in case you ever find a recipe that calls for half and half and you look in your refrigerator and go, I don't have any. It's heavy cream and milk, half of each. So we're going to mix this on high for just a couple minutes, and then we're going to pour it into our baking sheet. So now our batter's done, and I got this fancy new tool. so that I can get everything that is on my mixer blade off. And yes, you could probably do this with a spoon, but it's just not as effective, and it's definitely not as fun. And it does not give me an excuse to convince my husband that I need a new gadget for my kitchen. These are business investments. That's what I tell him. See, got all of that batter off. Now we're going to go put it in our 9x13 pan. So we're going to stir the bottom of the bowl just like we always do to make sure that everything comes up and everything gets stirred together. Nothing gets stuck down there at the bottom. And then I have this, it's really a 10 by 12 and a half sheet pan where we're going to bake. We're going to pretend it's a 9x13 because it ends up with the same amount of batter. I'm going to pour this in. All that batter out. Now we're going to spread it throughout the pan. Make sure we have an even layer. And then we're going to take that crumble we made earlier, and we are going to sprinkle it over the top. So you want to crumble it up into pieces. We're going to spread it all over. It's going to be like a whole nother layer in the topping. And then this bakes in a 325 degree oven for 50 minutes, 50. So we'll be back in almost an hour to see how it turned out. So our coffee cake took 55 minutes instead of 50, but it's out of the oven, and now we're going to let it cool for about an hour.